For more insight on what all of this means here at home in the United States, let's turn to the director of the Heritage Foundation's Margaret Thatcher Center. He's also a former advisor to the late British Prime Minister, Nile Gardiner. Nile, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure, Gillian.
So a bit of chaos across the pond in terms of the politicking this week. But the bottom line for Johnson, what is it? Is he going to survive all of this?
I think he will, and I think ultimately this is a battle now between the British people and Parliament. Parliament is voting to delay Brexit, to seek an extension to Article 50. The goal of the Remainer MPs in Parliament is to completely derail Brexit altogether. The British people voted for Brexit. In June 2016, 17.4 million Britons voted to leave the EU. That is the will of the British people. The job of Parliament is to implement the will of the British people, and Boris Johnson is standing on behalf of the British people, saying that he will not agree to what Parliament is asking him to do.
This is why we very fondly refer to him as the British Trump, is it not? It's Parliament, aka the Congress here in the United States, saying, you guys don't know what you want, we're here to tell you. We're here to try and help you help yourselves. And Johnson is standing there as a representative of the popular feeling, right? That's
yeah, I think that Johnson does represent the popular sentiment in the United Kingdom. He has called for a general election to resolve the current political impasse, and the latest polls show support for the Conservative Party led by Boris Johnson absolutely surging at this time, and the Conservatives certainly would win a big majority if an election were to be held today. And this is why, of course, the Labour Party, the opponents of Brexit, do not want to see a general election, because they know they are going to lose, because the will of the British people is for Britain to leave the EU on October the 31st. With or without safety rails in place. We want out, right? That's yes, with or without a deal is the approach of Boris Johnson, deal, right? Which is absolutely right.
And you agree? I was going to ask you for your assessment of that. Do you think that leaving without a deal is reckless? Do you think it's dangerous, or do you think it's really the only politically legitimate path forward?
I think it's the most realistic path forward, because the European Union has been extremely difficult in terms of the negotiations with the United Kingdom. The EU is trying to stop Brexit, to derail Brexit, and to make the conditions of any EU withdrawal agreement extremely tough for the UK. And so there hasn't been the sort of goodwill that you would need on the EU side, and hence a no deal, I think, is the most realistic, likely option for the United Kingdom. But Britain will do just fine under a no deal.
That's okay, so that's the key here, right? For our British friends, we want them to be okay, we want them to survive. If they go forward without a deal, right, are you very worried about the kind of economic consequences they're going to suffer, or do you think that too might iron itself out over the coming years?
I think Britain will do just fine. Britain is the world's 5th largest economy. The US and the UK are already working on a large-scale free trade agreement.
Right.
And I think that Britain will thrive and prosper outside of the European Union with or without a deal. And after all, the British economy is hugely important to Europe. And I expect that European leaders, once Britain leaves the European Union, will look for pragmatic solutions to ensure that trade continues to flow freely between the UK and the European Union. So I'm not worried at all. I believe that once Britain leaves the European Union, Britain will be hugely successful on the world stage, and Brexit is all about freedom, sovereignty, self-determination, economic liberty as well, and I think you'll see Britain doing extremely well in the Brexit era.
Let's talk about optics for a second, much as I loathe that word. President Trump met with Boris Johnson a couple weeks ago at the G7. First time they were meeting as equals, really, as foreign heads of state representing their governments, right? Lots of chemistry between them. President Trump loves to talk about how they're friends. I mentioned to you a moment ago, a lot of Americans see a lot of President Trump in Boris Johnson. But then this week, Mike Pence over there in London, he sat down with Boris Johnson for the first time at 10 Downing Street. I don't know if we have some video there for folks at home, but a lot of people said, whoa, 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 they definitely do not have the chemistry that Trump and Johnson has. What was the take on Vice President Pence in the UK? What did they make of him?
Well, actually, I thought that Vice President Pence's visit to London was very successful, and clearly Vice President Pence is a huge supporter of Brexit and the special relationship.
He is, but he's very different. His nature, his disposition is very different from Boris Johnson. he was very diplomatic and official seeming, and he spoke to Johnson in a way that really, it's just a very different vibe, and the mannerism between, that they both show is very different.
Yeah, I think certainly very, very different individuals, but I think ideologically completely in sync. And I do think that Mike Pence's visit to London was very successful. I spoke to a number of British MPs who were closely watching developments there, who thought that the Vice President's visit was a tremendous boost for Britain. And it's great to have the world superpower standing shoulder to shoulder with the British people. I think Brexit is great for Britain. It's great for America as well. And that's a message that the Vice President strongly reinforced in London. Absolutely the right signal to be sending.
It also sounds like Prime Minister Johnson wants to get Vice President Pence to convince Americans that they should eat haggis. In 5 seconds, your thoughts on the possibility of that happening?
Well, that may be a bit remote, but I do think we're going to have a great US-UK free trade agreement, which is going to be wonderful for both sides of the Atlantic.
Do you think we should try it?
Haggis.
Yes or no?
I wouldn't recommend it myself,
All right.
actually.
Well, we're going to take your word.
It's an acquired
Really.
taste.
I'm thankful this conversation has only lasted 5 seconds.
Thanks, Nile.
Thanks very much, Gillian.